been resisting the colonial governments of North and South America for hundreds of years. I am here to say that migration is our right, that no one is illegal on stolen land.
We are back again, and essentially today we're going to be discussing a conversation that was held today on Face the Nation with House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, I believe, speaking with host Margaret Brennan about ICE and what's going on as of right now with all these stories and the headlines coming out.
And we turn now to House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who joins us from New Orleans. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret.
I know, in addition to being a leader in Congress, you have this unique experience of having been the victim of political violence yourself. You know how dangerous rhetoric can be. We've heard a lot of anger in the past 24 hours, and your fellow Louisianan Senator Bill Cassidy said the events in Minneapolis are not only incredibly disturbing, but the credibility of ICE and DHS are at stake. He called for a joint federal and state investigation. Would you join his call?
Well, I don't question the credibility of ICE. They're doing an incredibly hard job. Look, we are all just feel sorry about what happened in Minneapolis. And this has happened over and over again. I mean, I'm not just talking about regarding ICE. I mean, they've got some failed local leadership. They let their city burn down years ago. They have chaos, it seems like, all the time in places where other cities don't. ICE is operating in a lot of cities, Margaret, and you don't have these kind of incidents in any other city but Minneapolis. And
you don't see these numbers either, though.
Yesterday didn't happen. What's that?
You don't see these numbers either, though. When we looked at, for example, at the federal response in New Orleans, I mean, it's just a fraction of the number of federal agents. Nearly 3,000 is quite a lot for a city the size of Minneapolis.
But even in that type of situation, though, is that the reason why there is a lot more agents in Minneapolis is because of the rhetoric, the protesters that are there, that's heightening things up to where, you know, really law enforcement, border control, ICE can't really do their job while they're there. So you have to create these layers, essentially, within everything. The first layer is to be able to watch out around for the crowds and make sure that, you know, you're looking around to make sure that everything's under control and you can tell people to stay where they are within a certain proximity, while the second layer, inner layer, is at that point in time doing the core investigation as far as what they're targeting on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, you're going to see that. But again, that's because of the rhetoric. All the other states essentially didn't really have this much pushback outside of Chicago, maybe. But even Chicago wasn't to this extent. This is taking it to a whole nother level. Truly is. But I digress.
Well, that's because they didn't get resistance in cities like New Orleans, where, you know, when you look in Minneapolis, and I just listened to the chief, and you could hear him lamenting 4 times, I think he said, that they're strapped so thin. And let's keep in mind, Minneapolis is a city that defunded their police. That's not the chief's fault. That's the failed Democrat leader's fault. But at the same time, when they defund the police, that leaves the chief stretched thin. And so
he was talking.
I would say this, let me interject real quick again, is that when he said defund the police, you know, that was a rhetoric. That was way back when, in 2020, they like to call it Summer of Love, I think that's what they call it. But even with that rhetoric as far as defunding the police, I was reading up on that too, just to kind of make sure that I understood it's like, did they actually do that? Is the reason why they don't have as much help because they did defund the police? Well, that's not, I would say that it's partially true, because from what I was reading here or researching here is that in 2020, what they did was, in Minneapolis specifically, they redirected $8 million into other programs that could be helpful. I guess showing face to the public, like, hey, you know, we're trying to help out. But they didn't totally get out there to the police department.
They made a decision not to assist ICE.
He was talking to dealing with the federal issues, because when you look at the Minnesota database, shooting victims down 76%, homicides down 67%, burglary down 39% year-to-date, sex offenses down, robberies down, motor vehicle theft is up. So he was talking about the deal that they have now, that the stretch they have now dealing with the federal agents who are there.
Well, but remember, these agents have also arrested thousands of violent criminals in Minneapolis. That's one of the reasons that crime is down. And we're seeing that across the country. ICE, and look, again, anytime something bad happens, we all lament that. I wish it didn't happen. But the rhetoric does need to be toned down. But we also need to remember, why is ICE doing this in cities? They're enforcing federal law, Margaret. The law says you can't be here illegally, and if you're committing violent crimes, the president made it clear. In fact, he was elected. President Trump was elected to get rid of criminals in our communities. 416,000 criminals have been arrested by ICE just in the last year. That has helped make our communities safer.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the politics of this, because undoubtedly the president was elected on a platform of immigration enforcement. There was a lot of support for it. But our latest poll shows more than half of Americans say ICE is making communities less safe. Almost 2/3 of Americans say they dislike the president's approach to his deportation program. There is not public support for the way this policy is being implemented. Do you think there needs to be a reassessment?
All right, so stop it there. So when these networks have these polls, one of the things that I take in consideration, I think that we all take in consideration at times, is the fact is that, these polls are based upon individuals that probably watch CBS, they watch their coverage. If the coverage is biased, if the rhetoric they spill is, biased to a certain type of group, then obviously if you ask them probably a narrow question like that, you're going to get a certain type of response. But if you were to open it up to other questions, maybe you'll get a different response than that, and then you wouldn't be able to cater the statistics to an argument that you want to build against the administration, essentially. So I digress.
Reassessment.
Well, if you asked people in a poll, do you want violent criminals that are here illegally in your community, yes or no? What do you think the answer is going to be? I will tell you overwhelmingly, they will say, please get the violent criminals out. In fact, you're seeing that on the ground in many cities where they are cooperating with ICE, where they don't have sanctuary city policies, and where you don't see, by the way, people going in the streets, breaking the law to interfere with law enforcement, which is a felony.
Right.
You have been a supporter of the Second Amendment. When Secretary Noem says, I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammo rather than a sign, do you believe Americans have the right to bear arms while they're protesting?
Well, first of all, I'm a co-sponsor of Louisiana's law that allows you to have a concealed carry permit. It's worked very well there. I don't know the state law in Minnesota. I know in a state like Louisiana, and frankly most states, you are not allowed to carry a gun while you're committing another crime. And interfering with law enforcement is a felony. It's something that, unfortunately, we're seeing in a lot of cities. You even had the police chief yesterday, Chief O'Hara, that you...
That's the point you stick with. The main thing is not that he had a gun as far as the Second Amendment is concerned. Like, that shouldn't be the issue. But to the point, as far as like what he's saying here, is that you just don't get involved. Don't get involved in an active investigation with a police officer, or excuse me, law enforcement in this instance. So, either or. But yeah, peaceful protests, great. We could be all for that, but don't get into a situation to escalate it, especially when you have a firearm on you. That is definitely not a good thing.
You just had on yesterday said of the protests going on after the shooting that they were unlawful.
Yes.
He actually said it was an unlawful assembly, what a lot of people are doing. And they were throwing things at ICE agents, throwing projectiles that could harm ICE agents. So let's tone this down. And leaders in Minnesota, by the way, have been ratcheting up the rhetoric.
Leader, we have seen a letter that Attorney General Pam Bondi sent to Governor Walz out in Minnesota offering to end the federal surge if the state does a number of things, among them giving access to the food assistance programs and voter registration logs. What's the purpose of that? What's the intent?
Well, I haven't read that letter between Pam Bondi and the governor, but I know that we are investigating tens of billions of dollars of potential fraud coming out of Minnesota. There have been hearings that have already been held. We have a lot of whistleblowers talking to us about major theft of taxpayer money coming out of Minnesota. And these are stealing programs from learning centers, from disabled students, programs that are being stolen, and the governor did nothing about it.
But
and
voter
obviously we're investigating
registration
that
laws?
aggressively.
As a conservative, doesn't that make you a little uncomfortable that they're demanding the state hand over voter registration logs? Like, what's the purpose of that?
Yeah, that's not an issue at all as far as like they're asking for this information. Matter of fact, I believe they have this information too. They had asked for them initially. It did say that there was a freeze attempt back on January 9, 2026. They have a situation to where they have this fraud that's occurring and spiraling out of control, and no one's really addressing it. Then yes, you should have, the federal government should have the right to be able to withhold funds until the investigations clear up and stuff. So I think that is a legitimate question. When you talk about voter laws, they want to see if there's any voter fraud going on there as well. That has been something that has been speculated, and I think even proven in certain instances, to where you have illegals that are voting, and there's nobody really checking to see if these votes are actually valid at that point in time. So, Trump administration is trying to get to the bottom to a lot of things within this particular state, which is an indicator in some other states as far as like what's going on. I digress.
The letter, I know we're trying in Congress to deal with putting laws on the books that will make sure that we protect the integrity of the vote nationwide. States like Minnesota have had problems with voter integrity. We want a national standard. The SAVE Act, which makes sure illegals can't vote, but also making sure you show picture ID. Those are things we're pushing for. That's across the board federally.
Well, non-citizens cannot vote. But I want to ask you, ICE, about all the things that have happened this week, even before that shooting in Minnesota. ICE has said its officers can go into homes without judicial warrants. ICE shot unarmed Renee Good, as you know, claimed that she was a domestic terrorist. An FBI agent resigned after she was ordered not to investigate.
She's acting surprised, though, is that ICE not going through and needing a judicial warrant is something that is, brand new and whatnot. It's always been there in regards to the statutes. When you look at the Immigration and Nationality Act, and that's what it is. Again, if they want to change it, they get in office, or they take the House and the Senate or presidency, then I have an opportunity to change it and whatnot. But until then, that's the law of the land, and got to keep it moving. I digress.
The officer who shot her. ICE detained at least 5 kids, including 5-year-old Liam Ramos, who was taken into custody by men in masks. Does this picture sound right to you? Are you comfortable with how this is being implemented?
I don't understand how there's an uncomfortability with that. The the appeal to fear is definitely there within our arguments. Also top of that with emotion. But anyways, I don't see where there's wrong with it. I mean, they confirmed that the parents didn't want the child, and the husband that they were looking for left the child there. What was I supposed to do at that point in time? Just leave the child out there? And if they did leave the child out there, they'd be like, child endangerment from ICE. Look what they're doing again. So it's just interesting to see how they choose these certain instances to be. Sorry, I digress. Oops.
Let's keep in mind that the 5-year-old's father was here illegally and was evading law enforcement and abandoned his child. ICE actually protected the child.
The family disputes that. The administration has a...
The family disputes it, so that just means that everything's where it's true. Family disputes it. No further investigation into that. Didn't look any further than that. Miss Brennan, whatever.
Problem with the previous administration's legal system for asylum. They don't like the app he used to file for asylum.
Well, Joe Biden allowed millions of people to come into our country illegal, including very violent people.
But they're retroactively trying to change the legality of the status.
President Trump was elected. The number one issue last year was President Trump saying, I'm going to secure the border, and he's doing it. But also he's removing violent people. 416,000
the father did not have a
criminals, illegals have been arrested by ICE. 416,000 have been arrested by ICE. These are very bad people. By the way, ICE just put up a website, not ICE, Homeland Security. Worst of the worst DHS. Go Google worst of the worst DHS. State by state, they show you all the people that have been picked up in each state. Your state, you can find out horrible people, murderers, rapists, that they picked up that would be on the streets today.
That doesn't apply
if President
to the father
Trump wasn't
or 5-year-old
securing this country.
Liam or the 2-year-old who was separated from her mother.
That father was
they are not
here
the worst
illegally
of the
and
worst,
abandoned his child. Go look at the website. It shows.
He said it. That father's here illegally. But it seems to me is that don't really care about that. At least Brandon, the way she's talking, like she don't care about that. She keeps getting pushed back. Like, oh, the father didn't commit these crimes, so he should be able to allow to stay off. No, you crossed the border illegally. That is in the statute. You can't do that. Yeah, it's right here in the Immigration and Nationality Act. Section 237A1B is that an alien who unlawfully enters the United States without inspection is deportable under this statute. Like, it's the law. Like, it's baffling. It really is baffling to see individuals just kind of like defying the law and say, like, nah, it's okay though. Huh? All right, whatever.
Shows you who they picked up. 416,000 people with violent criminal records. These are people, and by the way, America today has the lowest murder rate that we've had since 1900.
You already know is that, well, maybe she doesn't know based upon how she's interpreting things, but you can't like inject yourself or invade a space of an investigation, of an active investigation for law enforcement. Bottom line, you can't do that. That's like if you can go to the local and state level. If the police officer were investigating this murder and for whatever reason, this person just started to go inside and start to look at things and just like, I'm just going to video record you guys, just make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And they're actually in the scene or they're in proximity of the scene that they need to be able to probably see or probably investigate for evidence. The police officers are going to escort that person out. If that person doesn't leave, they will use force at that point in time. I don't understand how this defies logic at the end of the day, but maybe individuals are just put on the show. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the propaganda, the rhetoric, has to stop. It has to stop. We have to be able to assess these situations clearly and with clarity and abiding by the frameworks that were put in place for us with the law. Again, this is, I digress. But anyways, though, be safe. Please like, subscribe, share, comment on the channel of an unaffiliated mind. Have a great one. Deuces.